Thank you for watching the video series on the Climate Change Preparedness and Resilience Study from the Appleton League of Women Voters. This video will present information about our communities and how they can be made resilient and sustainable. It takes a lot of planning in order for our communities to be resilient and sustainable. In other words, our communities should be designed and planned to use alternative methods and new ideas. They should be designed to protect the future. What does it mean to be a resilient and sustainable community? Communities and people can and should be resilient and sustainable. These ideas are very important, especially in the face of climate change. Let's explore what these concepts mean. A resilient community or person is able to withstand expected and unexpected changes and challenges. It means being ready and prepared in the face of the change, thereby avoiding catastrophe. A sustainable community or person is one that plans for the future and adjusts activities and the use of materials so the next generation is not impacted in a negative way. It is following the Native Americans' 7-generation idea. With this method, each generation is making sure the next generation will be successful. Both of these ideas, resilience and sustainability, go together, even though they are a little bit different. Both require communities and people to make changes in their everyday activities and to think about the future. Take some time and look at what it means to be resilient and sustainable. The materials and processes a community uses and whether or not all parts of the community can work together requires thinking about the details. It requires thinking about infrastructure. Infrastructure is the systems for internal workings of the community. For resilient and sustainable communities, we need to look at building materials, the types of fuels that are used, how we get from place to place, and many, many other things. We should always be planning for the future. Infrastructure, when built right, can help make a community resilient and sustainable. Infrastructure is what holds a community together. It is what makes the systems work, especially helping the systems to work together. Just think of all the things we do every day. We use water, we live in buildings, we drive cars or ride bikes, and we buy things, and we eat. We work and recreate every day, and most of the time we don't have to think about sewage, drinking water, where the heating, lighting, and cooling comes from, or when, how, and where roads are built. All of these things are part of the infrastructure of our communities and homes. They have to work together, and they have to work well. Could we function without infrastructure? We could, but it would not be easy. What if the wastewater treatment plant stopped working all of a sudden, or the power plant stopped working? What if the Fox River flooded every time it rained or when the snow melts? There are many, many things that we take for granted when we live in a community. These things make up the infrastructure that keeps our communities working and hopefully they are working smoothly. Planning for possible flooding or for protecting wildlife and plants and for preserving farmland is important, but it does not happen on its own. Green spaces may not look like infrastructure, but green spaces are essential for the sustainability of our communities. Sometimes the impact of infrastructure can be negative. When our homes and industrial buildings continue to be dependent on fossil fuels and are not designed to conserve fuel, then we may see pollution and will see the negative impacts of mining. If we always build the biggest highway without thinking about how to use other means of transportation, then we continue to be dependent on fossil fuels, and we are not able to conserve land or fuel for the future. So, as our communities grow and change, as we start to think about how to be resilient and sustainable, then we can plan to protect wetlands and avoid flooding. We can use alternative energy and limit the negative impacts from the lighting, heating, and cooling of our homes. We can plan for the next generation. But wait a minute, not all communities are alike. Some are old, some are new, some are big and crowded, some are small and more spread out. But all communities still have infrastructure and will benefit from careful planning and design of that infrastructure. We can categorize communities as rural or urban, with urban being more crowded and rural being more open. But as you know, it's not always easy to see the difference between the two. All communities have an impact on our earth and on us. They should be designed to be resilient and sustainable. Numbers can be used to define the type of community we see and the type that we live in. The Census Bureau defines urban communities as noted on this slide, but the numbers don't always tell us everything. How the community is built may tell us something about the community. In rural areas, you may not see curbs and gutters, and there may not be the same stormwater collection system we see in cities. Instead, the water might be allowed to soak in and regenerate the groundwater through ditches and swales. Sometimes we might see a pond in an urban area, but it might not look like or be a natural pond. It is probably a retention pond that stops stormwater from running off a hard surface directly into storm sewers or rivers and streams, often taking pollution with it. Sometimes in a rural area, the pond we see might be a lagoon that is storing waste products from a farm. Or we might see a wet, soggy, swampy area that is undeveloped. This area might and should be protected to allow for controlling floods and for regenerating groundwater. Something exciting is often happening in our cities. There are more community gardens and urban farms being developed. Think about Riverview Gardens here in Appleton or Growing Power in Milwaukee. What a great way to help a community be resilient and sustainable. But we are also seeing expansion of urban and industrial areas into the rural communities. We may see train switching stations or fuel transfer hubs like this, or other types of development in an area that used to be open and used for farming or for wildlife habitat. In rural areas that are more spread out and have fewer people, you might see more open areas and green spaces. These can be natural or they can be planned. In either case, these open areas are essential for many reasons. Protecting our communities from pollution and flooding is essential. Making sure we have a clean source of drinking water helps both rural and urban areas. One way to protect communities is to have the right kind of sewage treatment. This would be large wastewater treatment plants in a city or a set of septic systems or septic mounds in the rural area. When we plan for transportation, we should take into account different methods of getting from one place to another, making our communities more resilient and sustainable. Rural communities can benefit from planning and designing more resilient and sustainable infrastructures. Many rural communities, or what we call towns and villages in our area, are spreading out and getting bigger, with more people moving to them. As our towns and villages grow, they should be designed to protect farmland and wetlands. There should be open space between communities for wildlife and native plants. Streams, rivers, and wetlands should be protected to avoid pollution and flooding. Farms and communities can live side by side, and many farmers are using more sustainable farming practices, making it easier for us to get organic and local produce. Another one of the League of Women Voters videos in this series discusses farming practices in more detail. Cities or urban areas require innovative designs and planning to make them more resilient and sustainable. There are many opportunities for making this happen. Cities and towns have planning committees, so why not get involved in your community? Making sure sewage is treated correctly and that our drinking water is safe is very important for our health. Think about what happened with lead in the water supply in Flint, Michigan. Or think about the concerns for lead in the pipes in Menasha. Recycling has improved over the years, with fewer materials and items being thrown away, but recycling has its limits. We should all consider using and buying less, especially less plastic. And where does the water go after a heavy storm? Does it run directly into the Fox River or Mud Creek, or can it be retained on permeable surfaces and allowed to soak in? Communities should be planning for a variety of ways for us to get around town. Individual cars are not always the best way to do that. Using the bus, walking, or bicycling to and from work or the store is a great way to get exercise and to help your community be more resilient and sustainable. Remember, if you drive to work, you will need to park your car. Parking lots take up a lot of space, and most of the time they are made of a hard surface that does not allow water to soak in. Water can run quickly off a parking lot, causing street flooding. Planning for future transportation needs and for not always using a car is very important as we build communities that are more resilient and sustainable. There are many things that can be built into a community. Individual buildings can be improved, and the land around them can be adapted. Communities can use pedestrian malls in areas where cars are not used or needed. Having sidewalks can make it easier for pedestrians. Can those sidewalks be permeable and let the water soak in? These types of design and planning are really important to make our communities resilient and sustainable. Individual homes and buildings can be adapted. Rain gardens and rain barrels work great for conserving water. Having your own garden is a good way to encourage native plants and pollinators. Homes and other buildings can be designed and built to use less energy and to use renewable energy for lighting, heating, and cooling. What could you do at your own home? Is there a patio area? Could you use permeable pavers? Could you fix an overflowing gutter or use a rain garden to help control stormwater runoff in your yard? Composting is a great way to decrease the amount of waste from homes. Some communities are setting up community compost sites in order to recycle food waste as well as recycling yard waste. Does your community have a food waste program? In this presentation, we went over many points of interest, talking about how communities, both rural and urban, can be planned and designed to be more resilient and sustainable. In the Fox Cities, there are planning committees and sustainability committees or programs. We have cities and towns and businesses and homes that are examples of good ideas for improving how our infrastructure impacts the earth. We have the UW system and other programs that can help us learn how to make many changes that can be used to implement the 7-generation idea. Being ready for expected or unexpected events and planning to make sure the next generation can be successful is what it means to be a resilient and sustainable community. By building our communities with thoughtful designs and plans, we can make this happen. The next several slides have many resources listed for information about rural and urban communities and how they can be made resilient and sustainable. We have resources about climate resilience and what it means and some new innovative ideas for building for the future. Take your time and check out these resources. They are very interesting. Thank you for taking the time to learn about how infrastructure can make our communities resilient and sustainable. There are more exciting videos available for you to check out at the Appleton League of Women Voters website. Thank you.